Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored Never Boring. I always keep one eye on the crowdfunding scene. Even though I don't back all that much, I like to know what's going on in the hobby, and if I find something interesting, I will share it on the channel. Recently, I was surprised to see a Kickstarter campaign for a role-playing game called Anima Songs from the Abyss, which at the time of making this video is fully funded and going strong, probably with a few days left to back. On closer inspection, it turned out to be an action RPG video game. But the reason it caught my eye, and the reason I'm bringing it up here, is because many years ago, when I got back into gaming after a long break from the hobby, one of the first tabletop miniatures games I picked up was called Anima Tactics. It's a skirmish level game with a sort of western anime style, and while I don't play it very often anymore, and it's no longer in production, I still think it's a decent game. Good enough, in fact, to have remained part of my collection for, good grief, 17 years. Incidentally, I also had a card game from the same universe called Anima Shadow of Omega, but that one did not stay in my collection. Anyway, while checking out Song from the Abyss on Kickstarter, I saw a lot of artwork I recognised from the tabletop game, as well as many of the characters I knew, and it made me realise that while the miniatures from Anima Tactics sometimes turn up in my videos, I've never really done a video about the game itself. So, yeah, I'm going to rectify that now. Sorry if you came here looking for news on the action RPG on Kickstarter, I don't know much about it. It looks pretty cool. I'll link to the campaign in the video description below just for information purposes, but for the rest of this video, I'm talking about little lumps of painted metal. I am very lucky as I have a copy of the hardback rules book for this game. It's not that easy to find these days. It's a really good one. Detailed, well formatted, nice fluff and storylines, and lavishly illustrated. Unfortunately, Anima Tactics was very unapologetic in its depiction of characters and themes, as you can see from this cover, and that is going to be a turn-off for some people. I don't really care for the style myself. I would prefer something less, flamboyant, but it doesn't really bother me. It's just not my personal preference. Characters are cast in metal and available in single blister packs or in faction boxes usually containing 6 characters. Unfortunately, while the miniatures are really nice, they do tend to have a lot of flash and mould lines, usually have fiddly little bits that are a pain to work with, and they are prone to damage. On the plus side, they come with their unit cards, an upgrade card, and any other cards necessary for their special abilities, and as you only need 2 or 3 characters per side, when the game was still in print, it was pretty easy to get into without having to spend hundreds of pounds up front. To begin a game, you pick the size of the battle by choosing a number of levels, and then you select characters that total that number. For example, one of my favourite characters, Evangeline, is 50 levels, which is actually pretty high. Don't worry about all those super confusing icons on her character card right now, we'll go through those later. You can also use levels to buy advantage cards, representing weapons, items and special events, although you get an additional allowance equal to 10% of the total levels for the game to spend on those cards as well. So, for example, if I was playing a 100 levels game, I could spend up to 100 levels on characters, and then I could spend whatever I had left, plus an additional 10 levels on advantage cards. However, there is a restriction that you cannot have more cards than there are characters in your force. When choosing a force, you can build based on their organisation or alignment. The alignment is either light, dark, or neutral. Light and dark units don't mix, but neutral units will team up with anyone. If you build based on alignment, you benefit from having a lot of characters at your disposal, cherry-picking your favourites from multiple factions. This gives you access to a wide range of skills and abilities, but also allows for fun scenarios where characters who don't necessarily get on in the lore are forced to team up. Organisations represent more specific factions. For example, Evangeline is from the Church faction, while the burly knight Cronin is from the Empire. While most characters are part of a faction, there are some that are classed as wanderers, who are more like mercenaries for hire. When you build a force based on organisation, you can ignore the alignment of the characters. Every organisation contains good and bad characters, but they are all working towards a common goal, even if their methods differ. Of course, all of the characters in your team must come from the same organisation, with the exception of being able to take one wanderer for each 200 levels you are playing to. So, in a 400 levels game, you could include 2 wanderers in your team. Army building is more regimented when using organisations, but it does come with some advantages. For example, your whole team will gain 1 or more organisation bonuses that you get to pick before the game starts. Additionally, some characters from the same organisation will group into teams, granting an additional set of benefits. So building a force is quite involved and interesting. There's lots to think about, and the use of the alignment system means you can buy characters from any faction you like and still make use of them. I think that's great because no cool unit is ever off the table. The gameplay itself is pretty straightforward, and for the most part a lot of things are going to be familiar to anybody who plays tabletop skirmish games. However, there are some really interesting standout rules. Each turn of the game starts with a recovery phase, where both players simultaneously perform some general upkeep. They untap all their unit cards to indicate all of their characters are ready for action, and then each character gains action points equal to the number of blue spheres on the side of their card, up to a maximum equal to the total number of spheres on their card. Going back to Evangeline, she has 4 spheres on her card, of which 3 are blue. That means in each recovery phase she gains up to 3 actions to add to any she saved from previous turns, but she can never have more than 4 in total. The action points are used for generic operations such as moving and attacking, but also for special moves unique to the characters, all of which have their own costs. And I really love this action point system. It creates a really enjoyable minigame where you have to balance performing actions with saving actions for something later on. Look at Cronin for example. He has the Scarlet Heartbeat special ability that costs 3 action points, but he only gains 2 action points per turn because he's a big slow boy. That means you have to really think carefully about getting him into the right position and conserving his action points so he can unleash this powerful ability when he needs to. Also in the recovery phase, each player recovers any used Gnosis points. Gnosis points can be used before any dice roll to effectively roll with advantage. You roll 2 dice and take the best result. You get 1 Gnosis point per game turn for each 100 levels of the game, so in a 200 level skirmish you would get 2 Gnosis points in each turn. And again, this is a rule I really like. There are always lots of ways for specific characters to mitigate dice rolls, but I really enjoy having this communal pool of extra rolls that you can use across your force when you really need to make sure a roll goes your way. And the fact the points are recovered at the beginning of each turn means you will have plenty over the course of a battle, and that helps to keep the game feeling fast and fluid. You are never bogged down for too long constantly failing dice rolls. After the recovery phase, you have the upkeep phase, so yet more bookkeeping. You remove 1 token of each type of status effect on each of your units, check to see if summoned creatures stick around, pay action points for any ongoing abilities, and then dice off with your opponent for initiative. Then we get to the good stuff, the action phase. Starting with the player with initiative, players alternate tapping one of their character cards and activating the associated character. This is when you get to spend most of your action points. Generally, actions can be performed multiple times as long as you have the action points available, but you are only allowed to make 1 type of movement per turn. Furthermore, actions are divided into active actions, which you perform when the character activates, and reactive actions, which you can trigger in response to events on your opponent's turn. For example, any character can make a free movement of up to 2 inches. You can use this free movement during an activation, but you can also use free movement as a reaction. The ability to move on your opponent's turn makes the game feel really dynamic. The battlefield is constantly changing as enemies dance and wheel around each other. And while free movement cannot be used to escape from a charge or to avoid an attack, it can be used to do cool things like moving one of your strong units to intercept a charging enemy that has targeted one of your weaker characters. Movement and clever positional play is key to victory in Anima Tactics. In addition to free movement, there are several other ways of getting around. Each character has 2 speed values represented by the wing icon on their character card. Cronin here has a speed of 6 when walking or 10 when running. For 1 action point, you can move up to your walking value. You can walk in any direction and change direction if you want to. For 2 actions, you can run up to your running value. You cover more ground, but you aren't allowed to change direction. For 3 actions, you can charge, which lets you move up to your running value in a straight line, and if you end movement in base contact with an enemy, you can make a regular attack, except you can roll 2 dice, picking the best result, and you add +2 to your attack attribute. Also for 3 actions, you can perform an attack from above, a special charge action that lets you drop from elevation onto unwary foes below. The attacker gets +1 to the attack for each inch they drop, and again, they can roll 2 dice and pick the best result to keep. Alternatively, for 3 actions you can do a slam. This is another type of special charge, but the subsequent attack doesn't cause damage. Instead, it moves the target a number of inches equal to the damage it would have taken during a regular charge. And finally, for 1 action, a character can climb a vertical surface no taller than 8 inches. That's no less than 7 different types of movement, and that's before you consider any special movement abilities your characters may have. Most of the other common actions available to characters relate to combat in some way. A basic attack costs 2 actions, we'll talk more about that in a moment. And for 2 actions you can also do a special push attack, which rather than inflicting damage, moves the target a number of inches equal to the damage they would have received from a regular attack. And one fun thing I want to point out regarding pushes, slams and throws. If the target of the attack hits an inanimate object, they will take damage from the impact. But even better, if you can slam them into one of your characters who hasn't activated this turn, you are allowed to make a reactive attack with that character to punch the poor victim as they fly through the air. The flexible movement rules and the way it's possible to react to events and bounce your enemies around really does make it feel at times like you are playing an adaptation of some crazy Japanese animated series. It's like Ninja Scroll for your tabletop, and it's very easy to imagine all of your characters Naruto running all over the place. But I digress. For 1 action, you can also escape from being engaged with an opponent. If you roll 6 or more on a d10, you break free and can then move as normal. And then there is the Seek action, which also costs 1 action point. It's common in Anima Tactics for characters to go into hiding, and it's possible to use the Seek action to find these tricksy sneakers. Every character exerts a zone of control which extends 8 inches in all directions. When seeking, you roll a d10 and reveal any hidden characters within that character's zone of control that you score high enough to spot. The final 2 actions are dodge and counterattack, which are actually reactions you can use when you are subject to an attack. So this seems like a perfect opportunity to look at attacking in more detail. I think the combat system in this game is neat. Really simple, really effective. At its most basic, the attacker rolls a d10 and adds their attack stat plus any modifiers. Harrod here has an attack of 5. You compare this total to the target's defense value. Cronin, the beefy boy he is, has an excellent defense of 8. You subtract the defense from the attack. If the total is less than 0, the attack has missed. If the total is equal to or greater than 0, the attack hits, and the level of success is equal to the difference between the attack roll and the defense attribute. You then add that level of success to the attacker's damage attribute, which in Harrod's case is 4, and then you reduce this total by the target's armor, which in Cronin's case is 5. The final result is how much damage the target takes. That may sound slightly complicated, but really it isn't. For example, let's say Harrod has rolled a 7 to attack. He adds his attack value of 5 for a total of 12, which beats Cronin's defense of 8 by 4. That's a hit on Cronin with 4 levels of success. That 4 is added to Harrod's damage attribute of 4 for a total of 8. We then deduct Cronin's armor of 5, leaving us with 3 damage. We deduct this 3 from Cronin's life point total, which started at 20. Cronin receives a minor flesh wound, and Harrod is about to enter a world of hurt. So there we go. It's really simple, and everything is worked out from just 1 dice roll, and I think that's just swell. But obviously there's more to it than that. As we have already seen, there are gnosis points you can spend on the roll. There are also critical hits. If you roll a 10 when attacking, you will always succeed in the attack and will always inflict at least 1 wound, even if the target's armor would normally negate it all. Then we have the really clever stuff. Before the attack is made, the defender can choose to dodge. This is a reaction and costs 1 action point. The defender can then roll a d10 and add the score to their defense value. However, for 3 action points, the defender can play a counter-attack. First they roll a d10 and add the score to their defense. If the attacker then fails to hit, the defender can immediately make an attack, but with a -2 modifier to their attack attribute. And that counter-attack can be dodged or countered as well. I find that all very appealing. The back and forth of combat, the flexibility of the options, the simple framework of a basic attack with those little advanced techniques you can employ at just the right time to tip things in your favour, it's all really nice. And of course many characters have special attacks and counters that can be used in place of these basic abilities. Harrod, for example, has his gloriously titled Murder Attack. If he is hidden, the attack gets +5 attack and +5 damage. Plus the attack causes level 3 poison with an effect of 16, which simply means the attack will cause poison that remains in effect for 3 turns unless the defender can score at least 17 by rolling a d10 and adding their resistance score, which for Cronin is 8. Meanwhile, Cronin has a special counter attack which works exactly like a regular counter, except it gets +4 attack and +2 damage. Some characters will also have the ability to attack at range using guns, bows or magical blasts. The process is exactly the same as for melee attacks, except there are modifiers for things like range and cover. The most interesting thing about ranged attacks is that they can be intercepted in the same way as a charge. If the line of the attack passes within 2 inches of one of your models, you can choose for that model to take the hit. The model doesn't move, but it faces the full force of the attack. This is an excellent way to protect your weaker support characters. And again, it's a really cool rule that conjures images of heroic characters leaping into danger at the last second, deflecting a bullet with their whirling katanas before making a little noise and directing a nonchalant half smile with a slight nod towards their shocked ally. It's incredibly cinematic, and as I said before, it makes the game very free-flowing and exciting. Throw in all of the other special abilities your characters may have access to, like teleporting, flying, buffing and debuffing allies, or even in the case of one particularly interesting character, manipulating time, and it all adds up to a really engaging experience that plays quickly and constantly generates those moments you're going to talk about long after the game is over. And of course, there's much more I could say about the game. There are extensive rules for terrain and fighting in buildings, summoning creatures from other dimensions to fight for you, lots of different status effects and special scenarios, but I think you get the point. It's a really enjoyable game with a lot to offer, and there are even a few rules that are not entirely dissimilar to rules in one of my current favourite skirmish games, Moonstone. Of course, sadly, Anima Tactics is long out of print, and getting miniatures for the game now, especially in the UK, is incredibly difficult. You may be able to pick up the odd character here and there, but trying to build any kind of extensive collection is a task not for the faint of heart. There are certainly more than a few characters I would love to have that I am resigned to never owning. Oh, and finding the hardback rulesbook is probably going to be even tougher. But if you can circumvent those hurdles, maybe find someone selling a job lot somewhere, this is a game worth checking out. It has stood the test of time in my game collection, and I don't see that changing. But that is it from me for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really like this video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.